Well, joining us now is our weekend journalist panel. Robert Fife is the Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Globe and Mail. Tonda McCharles is the Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star. And Nigan Sinclair is columnist with the Winnipeg Free Press. Hello to the three of you.
Hey, Michael.
Thanks for having us.
So listen, I want to be... Hi, Nigan. Listen, I do want to begin with what we just heard from Danielle Smith. As we said in the introduction, here she is calling the Environment Minister an ideologue. And add on to that the criticism that comes from a Liberal MP about Steven Guilbeault, saying that he's not the man to deliver the message. Is Steven Guilbeault the right ambassador for the Environment File?
Well, you know, despite what Madam Smith and Mr. MacDonald think, I guess the more important thing is the Prime Minister thinks that Steven Guilbeault is the right man for the file and is not prepared to move him. In the most recent reset of this government, he's one of the people that he kept in place because they actually love to be on the international stage touting that they have an environmental activist as the environmental minister. But there's no question that he's got a really tough message to deliver, not just to Danielle Smith, but to many provinces on climate change. And yeah, they've had big clashes. I understand there's also been lots of big clashes within cabinet over this stuff. But I think the fact of the matter is he's not going anywhere. And he does have the backing of the government on the clean electricity plan. And the budget is putting billions and billions and billions of dollars behind going in that direction.
Mm-hmm. Clean electricity plan. And also really good to point out what Danielle Smith is talking about is clean electricity. What Ms. MacDonald was talking about had to do with the carbon tax writ large. But, you know, let's get back to Steven Guilbeault, though, Bob. Here you have a Conservative Premier and a Liberal MP making a very similar criticism. What do you make of it?
Well, first of all, Ms. Smith is the wrong person to be accusing somebody of being an ideologue because she is an ideologue on a lot of issues herself. But I do think that she has a point in this regard. Steven Guilbeault is not an effective ambassador in large parts of the country. I think he sells well in Quebec, and I'm sure that's one of the reasons why they wanted him. And to Tonda's point, internationally he is an eco warrior or environmental warrior, and they like to put him in the window in that regard. But he is not a great, in my view anyway. He doesn't seem to have an ability to work well with other provinces, and that's a skill set that Catherine McKinnon. Even though she was felt as strongly about the economy as he did, had more of an ability to do so. And it's easier for the Conservatives and for Smith to be able to paint him in a corner as somebody who's, oh, look at this guy, he's too much of an ideologue, he doesn't understand the economy, and he's the wrong person for this kind of job. And it has been effective for Pierre Poilievre in the way they've targeted him. But he isn't going anywhere, so folks got to live with it.
Yeah. Nigan, what do you make of it?
Well, Alberta got to Alberta, as I would say, in that, you know, we've got a premier in Danielle Smith who's talking about Alberta first, is talking about we want half the money of the pension plan back. The fact is, you know, any chance Alberta can get to try to gain votes. I mean, whenever Danielle Smith is in trouble, it's immediately turning not to the NDP as much as it is to Justin Trudeau, because she knows she can get favorability, and particularly on the environmental file. I mean, the environmental file, the issues around the carbon tax, endlessly score political points for Danielle Smith. But at the same time, I think Bob's right. You know, Steven Guilbeault has a real problem with communication. Also, I think one of the major issues around the Trudeau cabinet is that since the shuffle and then since the kind of paranoia of the rise of Pierre Poilievre, the cabinet's becoming tighter and tighter. And what that means is it's more apt to being accused of Ottawa insiders, nepotism, and the kind of, issues around sort of seeing a particular type of political brand as being most favorable to Justin Trudeau, and Steven Guilbeault fits all of those criteria. I mean, you know, even just painting him as an activist is a way to sort of talk about Trudeau as a grassroots person or community person. And so the challenge, of course, is always going to be comms with this government. I mean, we all know that the Trudeau government has suffered for years, whether it be the WE scandal, whether it be Jody Wilson-Raybould. I mean, comms is the challenge of this government. They continually have a government that kind of stumbles upon itself. But I mean, on this issue, you can't give the right, Pierre Poilievre, Danielle Smith, more fodder than they already have.
I just want to jump in there because I think actually it goes. I think comms is a big challenge for them, but I don't think it's the only challenge. And I think this is an example of where policy is a big challenge, and it's not just in Alberta. Look, Atlantic Canada, it has big also problems with not just the sort of some of the electricity stuff, but the carbon tax, the implications of their economies for what the government's trying to do on the environment. And so, yeah, it is a comms problem, but it is also a policy problem. And, we've all just remarked about how Guilbeault is perhaps not the best man for some of that stuff. But I think that he's the front man for Trudeau. And I think that they've committed, they're all in on the climate change plan, right? And they've put their money where their mouth is on it. So we'll see how it plays out. But I think that actually it's not just comms, it's execution and it's policy design.
Yeah, well, certainly, we even saw that in London when the Liberal caucus met before the return to Parliament. Many, not necessarily in front of the media, expressing concerns that this is not going to be a winning issue for them at the ballot box.
It's trouble for them.
So we're going to watch. But listen, before we're done here, I also want to talk about the historic moment that happened in Manitoba this week, the election of a majority NDP government. Wab Kinew now set to be sworn in as the first First Nations premier in the province's history. Let's take a listen right now to what he had to say about the moment.
My wife, my mom, my kids had the toughest job in this election, which is that they had to put up with the attack ads without the ability to respond. And what I was able to tell them last night is that the people of Manitoba chose to reject that. And I would add that my Uncle Fred was on stage with us too, who was in St. Mary's Residential School, who experienced the worst of it in our country's history. So whatever feeling I have pales in comparison to how humble I feel to be walking in the trail that was blazed by others in our province.
Now, since election night, there have been many words shared about history being made. Tanya Talaga, with your paper, Bob, writing that there are those who now say that the eighth fire has been lit. So I just want to go around the table here, beginning with you, Niigaan. What do you make of the significance of this moment?
Well, with all due respect to Tanya, I think the eighth fire has been lit for a while now. It's not simply due to a First Nations premier. But that being said, the real challenge here is, yes, I can appreciate what Wab said in terms of rejecting the politics of division, the fact that this is the most racially tinged campaign in Manitoba history. And then on top of that, the fact that, we saw women in a landfill, there were human remains of human beings in a landfill being used as a political ploy for points to divide Manitobans. I don't know if that was rejected as much as Wab Kinew wants to paint it to be. I mean, we are talking about 30% of the electorate, 208,000 votes were cast for the Conservatives. Now, I'm not saying that's supporting the ideas that, the NDP party somehow is a bunch of full of ruffians or problems or brown-skinned people who want to defund the police, and that's certainly how they were painted. I'm just saying that they are certainly a lot of Manitobans, a large segment of Manitobans that were deeply uncomfortable with the nation of an Indigenous premier. And so while we take a step in the area of reconciliation, or we take a step in the area of inclusivity, we take a step in what Bob Kinew is talking about of undoing some of those issues around residential schools, I mean, the challenge is still very much here. And while I'm very proud of Manitoba, and I'm really impressed that Manitoba would reject some deep politics of division, it is not quite that simple. We have much work to do, and never mind the fact that Wab Kinew has chosen the most difficult issue to stake his political career on, healthcare. Multiple politicians have not been able to fix it. And if he stumbles in any way, we know that if you are an Indigenous person and you stumble, you don't get a second chance as much as often as perhaps other people do.
Chanda?
Well, I think that, moments like the election of Wab Kinew, the election of Greg Fergus, these are moments that are freighted, the firsts, right? They're freighted with symbolism. And, a lot of people who feel now represented where they weren't before take great, pride and comfort from that. But to Niigaan's point, I think that also all of these things are, they're great in the moment, and then I think people are held to sometimes stricter tests, but, are held to high standards. And I would just also add that all institutions are the people, and as strong or as weak as the people in those seats, right? So, just being representative for Mr. Canoe may not be enough, and we'll see on that healthcare test. I think that Nigan's right. That's going to be a huge challenge for him.
Yeah, well, I will say, I asked Wap Canoe when I was in Winnipeg whether or not, being the first, there's always pressure on being the first. Does he feel extra weight? He didn't really answer the question, but without a doubt, that is a specter in the room. Bob, what do you say about this moment?
Well, look, we have many, many miles to walk. This is an important milestone for sure, but let's go back to Jody Wilson-Raybould. I remember when she walked down that summer or fall day when she was sworn in, and the people had tears in their eyes, the first Indigenous Justice Minister, and what happened to her. She got chewed up by the system when she tried to be ethical and honest and not to bend to the Prime Minister's will to interfere in a criminal prosecution. So, as important as this is, we can only celebrate when we don't have any more Indigenous people living in poverty on reserves, and we don't have our streets full of Indigenous people who do not have the same opportunity as us. Important step, but my God, we've got a long, long, long ways to go.
Really appreciate that, Bob, Tonda, and of course, Nigan. Thank you for joining this week. Really appreciate the time.
Yeah, miigwech. Thanks.